Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Darcy Elks, and I will be conducting the seminar today. Just wanted to thank you for coming and say to welcome you on behalf of the Nebraska Coalition for Values-Based Training and the Disability Rights Nebraska Advocacy Organization. I live in Pennsylvania, but I have done quite a bit of work in Nebraska over the past 25 years. I have been teaching the ideas that I'm going to share with you today for a very long time in multiple places throughout this country, as well as internationally in a number of different countries. And I am also a parent of a young woman who's 28 years old who lives with a disability. So my experience is both professional as well as personal. We are offering this webinar in lieu of the 3-day social role valorization workshop that we had scheduled and obviously are not able to do because of COVID-19. So we are hoping to actually have that workshop face-to-face in June of next year. But in the meantime, a number of people had signed up for the workshop where there was a lot of interest. So we thought we would offer a webinar that would give you a taste of what we would cover in the workshop. And we hope that we'll be able to see you in person in June. This material, social role valorization, what used to be called normalization, and I will get into defining that in the webinar, actually has been taught for a very long time in Nebraska. In fact, Nebraska has a very unique place in the development of this idea because Dr. Wolf Wolfensberger, who I'm going to introduce you to by slide in a moment, actually developed these ideas and practiced them in the state of Nebraska when he first got started with his work. And so he learned a lot from the work in Nebraska, then went on to work in many different places. So I just wanted you to know that these ideas have been present in your state for a long time. There was a period when there was not much teaching, and Disability Rights Nebraska and the Nebraska Coalition for Values-Based Training has been really very committed to making sure that the information is available throughout the state. And so for the past 14 years, we have actually been able to offer social role valorization training one time a year. Before we actually get into the content of the workshop, I just wanted to go over some of the technical things with you. Probably everybody's pretty experienced in going to webinars now, but I just wanted to say on the right side of your screen there, you should see the control panel. And from there, you should be able to ask questions and adjust your audio settings. So by default, you're listening in your computer speaker system. If you decided that you would rather listen or join in over the phone, just select phone call in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed. There is also a questions box that you can see on your control panel, and we would really appreciate it if you have questions, if you write them in there. And we are going to leave time at the end of the presentation to answer at least some of the questions. And we would be willing to stay after the webinar to answer as many questions as we possibly can. We are not using the chat function during this webinar simply because there is a lot of content, and we want to make sure that we can get through the information and really offer it to you. So with that, I think we're ready to move into the content. I'm going to take my picture off so that you can focus on the presentation. Okay, so the power of social roles. This is based on the work of Dr. Wolfensberger. Oh, sorry. There we go. This is Dr. Wolfensberger. He has passed away. That he was an awesome advocate, very powerful leader, worked tirelessly to close institutions, was very involved in Nebraska in the closing of Beatrice State Institution. And he not only worked to close institutions, but he worked very hard with a group of people actually in Nebraska to figure out or create other alternatives to the institution. And this group of people, of which Dr. Wolfensberger was one of the main people, realized that there needed to be some guiding ideology, philosophy, values when creating the community system. And so he came up with this idea of what was normalization is now, it's evolved through the years, obviously, to social role valorization, which basically means adding value to people's social roles. And I will explain that more in a minute. And he was a very passionate guy. And so I thought you might appreciate that quote that you see there underneath his, or by his picture. So social role valorization begins with a vision. Okay, and what is the vision that has existed for now, a number, 30, 35 years? Well, it was a vision of really opening up possibilities for people to have access to a good life, the good things in life. So there was a recognition, that we were not doing very well as a society in terms of supporting people with disabilities to have the kind of life that most people in our society strive for and want, and many people do have this life. So I've kind of summarized it this way, a full, meaningful, inclusive life. So a full life would be a life where you have lots of things to do, okay, that you're busy. And I think probably many of you, can relate to that. Many people have calendars that are so full that they're looking for ways to have a little bit of a break. But not just in being involved in activities and doing lots of things, things that are meaningful to you, being involved in life in meaningful ways. And when we say meaningful, it means meaningful to you. And thirdly would be inclusive. So compared to some of the, the ways that people have been supported in the past, where there were lots of supports that put people apart in a way, the vision here for the good life is being fully part and participating within your community, within your town, within your neighborhood, within places of employment, within places of education. So that guiding vision really was used to create the community system. And of course, the community system has been in place now for quite a long time. This vision sometimes has been lost, I think, and not talked about a whole lot, but still we see that we have made progress. But a vision is just that. It's something that you're reaching for and stretching for. So while we have made progress, and here are some examples. This is my daughter in second grade. She was fully included, and of course we've made a lot of progress in the area of education with inclusion. Children living at home, so that much is seen for a number of years now. Support's being provided to the child and the family so the child can stay at home rather than being placed in a service. University opportunities opening up for people who live with disabilities, and specifically intellectual and developmental disabilities. So this is a picture of my daughter who went to Westchester University. And having the opportunity to pursue your interests and your passions within the context of your community, rather than always only being offered options for people with similar disabilities. Now we're seeing places open up, or we have seen places open up and welcoming people with disabilities to be part of the typical groups. And people with and without disabilities living together and sharing their lives with one another. And actually even owning your own home. I know there's some examples of this in Nebraska, which is very exciting, that people moved out of more traditional residential supports and services and have their own home. And employment. So the idea that people with disabilities would work within typical places of employment, has really grown a lot. Now, while we've made a lot of progress, according to that vision, we still, at least we are proposing to you to think about this, we still fall short, okay? So we do still see services, day services. This is a school program, actually, for obviously people who have disabilities and are young, moving into their young adult life. And what they're doing, sitting watching television all together. We see new kinds of residences, being built. And sad to say, we still see some institutions. So this happens to be a residential facility that accepts both children and people with intellectual disabilities. So we have a ways to go. And we might ask ourselves, why do we've had this vision for a long time, and we have made changes, and yet we all know that there are things that we could do a lot better to make the good life accessible to people. This is not about imposing anything on people. This is about offering options and making possibilities available to people. So why are we still struggling? Well, one of the reasons we're still struggling is because we are dealing with devaluation. So what do I mean by devaluation? I'm talking about a sociological process, okay, whereby a low or even no value is attributed to a person or group of people by another person or group of people, because some characteristic that the person or group has that are seen as not valued are not only not valued but perceived as really negative. So for example, if we're thinking about disability, in many people's minds, although some attitudes have changed, we still are dealing with some pretty negative attitudes, where in fact certain groups are seen as being less than, not as valuable as, not as worthwhile as. And that's, that is a judgment that's made based on judgment about the kind of disability that somebody lives with. Okay, so I am not saying that you devalue, okay, that you think of people as being of low value or even no value. But what we do need to realize is, even though we may not do that personally, we live in a society where there are people who do that, and there's a lot of that kind of thinking. And by the way, there are many groups of devalued people. We just need to look at what's happened here with the protesters, and that is, they don't use this language, but that is what the protesters are saying when they're saying Black Lives Matter. So we are, I don't know the identity of all of the people on the webinar, but I imagine many of you are interested in supporting people with disabilities to have access to a good life. So we are concerned thinking about people with disabilities, and this is what the people that you are supporting or thinking about, or if you're thinking about your own life, this is what we're up against. So I have a friend whose son has autism, and he's a wonderful guy. He's very talented, and he has some unusual ways of interacting or not interacting. And just because of that, you know, this wonderful man who has so much to offer is seen as being really having little or no value, and actually being seen as a burden. Well, when you think about somebody that way, then you're not really thinking about opening up possibilities to that person. Or my daughter, who lives with Down syndrome, she's always worked. I told you she's gone to university. She's always been included in regular school. And yet, to this day, she's 28 years old. People will see her and talk to her as if she's a child. So devaluation is alive and well, and we have to be aware of it so that we can counteract it and continue to move toward that vision. Now, some of the experiences then when you are devalued, and when in the longer workshop we talk much more about this, one experience is that you get relegated to a low social status. So again, that expresses itself in our society where you really don't, you're not seen as very important, and so you don't have much priority in the society. In fact, one of the things I'd recently heard on television was how COVID-19 was affecting people with disabilities. And it's quite interesting. I haven't heard anything about that. I've heard how it's affecting all other kinds of group of people, but it's taken quite a while to get to the point of thinking about how is COVID-19 impacting on people with disabilities. Why would they be one of the last groups of people that we'd be thinking about? Well, that's an example of you're kind of on the bottom part of the rung of the societal ladder. And of course, you may not be able to express it exactly, but if this is lived experience, you know that you're not as valuable, not as important as other citizens. Another experience that people, particularly people who are devalued, have is rejection. And that rejection gets expressed in many ways. We still have, as I talked about earlier, these segregated, congregated programs. In other words, programs where people are put together, not of their choosing, but with other people who may have similar disabilities apart and away. So I've been to this program many times, and honestly, people never get out. They arrive during the day, after in the morning, and once they arrive, the door is shut. They're there all day long, and they're apart and away from their community. And just one other thing I want to point out, can you see what these two very vital looking young men are being given to do? So puzzles that are designed for children. So that as well puts people into a role, which I'll come back to. Okay, this is an interesting example. So if you look at this slide, you see, if you look behind the tree, you see there's a playground there, right? And somebody thought of the idea, well, it would be nice to have a swing that is accessible. Okay, that's a great idea. But how did they set the swing up that's accessible? Away from the playground, very close, yet still apart, with a fence around it, and a sign that says, restricted area, users and carers are required only in this area. So even when we've got the idea that we should offer things that will open up possibilities for people to be part of their community, sometimes the way we do it still keeps people apart. This is a whole village that has recently been built for only people with autism or intellectual disabilities. So it's beautiful, but it's a whole village. So what are we saying to people? There is this thinking you're better off with your own kind apart and away from the rest of society. So all of you have experienced rejection, and you know what it feels like. So you can imagine how hurtful this is to people. And the last experience I want to talk about in this webinar is this idea that you get cast into negative roles. So that example I showed you of those young men sitting there being given those very childish puzzles to do is an example of people being cast into the role of child, eternal child. Here's another one. This is from a newspaper from a city not too far from where I live. And I think the picture kind of speaks for itself. It's about a camp for people with disabilities. Well, you see the picture of that young man, and you think about how old are people when they're hugging the legs of another person like that? Well, usually about, 1 or 2 years old. So already there's this stereotype out there, that people with intellectual disabilities are really eternal children. And something like this just reinforces that perception. And then the perception gets acted on and people get treated as children. Now, I mentioned to you, it's not only people with disabilities who get cast into devaluation and low social status. There are other groups as well. And I mentioned the protesters with Black Lives Matter, and also here, this this older man. So elderly people have become more and more devalued. And I don't know about you, but this would be my worst nightmare if I ended up retiring and being presented with this toy to play with. It's called Snakey, and it's a puppet as well. And it's put around the neck, and it's of the person, and there are little different pieces of this toy that you can squeeze that make different sounds and have different textures, and then there's the puppet. Well, this would be something that typically, I've seen that toy actually for like a 2 or a 3-year-old. So it's very demeaning, right, and very hurtful when you get cast into these negative role stereotypes. This is another one, last one I'm going to show you, of children in a school that actually is a school for children with autism, and they are controlled by electric shock. So their backpacks have electrodes in them, and the staff are able to shock them if they engage in any behavior that is deemed inappropriate. That's appalling in this day and age, even though, of course, electric shock has in most states, maybe all of the states actually, been deemed as illegal. There are some kind of, quote, special situations where you can go to court and get it allowed, and this is what happened in this situation. With all of the things that we know about how to assist people to engage in positive behavior, right? And we still have this. Okay, so that's what we're up against, right? And it's a mindset issue, it's a societal issue, and we can't, even though we say, we might say, well, I don't hold those attitudes, we can't really separate ourselves entirely from society. So, these kinds of ideas sort of seep in without us knowing. They become a mindset that then, directs action. So if we are trying to counteract the devaluation, move toward the vision, the very conscious, intentional, and practical ideas of social role valorization can be very helpful. The heart of this idea of social role valorization to move toward the vision is the idea of valued social roles. So here's the definition, and I believe Tess has made these handouts available for you. So if you want them, you'll be able to print them out. The enablement, the establishment, the enhancement, the maintenance. So those are very active words, enabling, establishing, enhancing, and helping somebody to maintain as well as to defend valued social roles for people and with people who are at risk of devaluation. By using as much as possible the culturally valued means. So this is a lot of words. If we had more time, I could break it down, but what I really want you to focus on is the idea of valued social roles in contrast to those roles that I just mentioned to you. So here's a definition of social roles. This is the idea has been studied for many years by different sociologists. This is one of the first sociologists, Talcott Parsons, who gives us a very straightforward definition. So it says a social role may be defined as a socially expected patterns of behaviors, responsibilities, expectations, and privileges. So valued social roles come with expectations, right? And responsibilities, and also hopefully some privileges. So for example, if you are a teacher, it's very clear, defined in your job description, also probably to some degree in your contract, that there are expectations of how you will behave. There are certainly responsibilities that you must carry out, and that there are some privileges to that role. For example, if you teach in the elementary or high school system, you get a lot of time off in the summer. Some schools do help you to go to classes to continue to develop your skills, and those classes would be paid for by the school. So those might be some of the privileges. As well, it is not just work roles. You could think about the role of a best friend, right? So in that kind of situation, together the friends figure out, they may share expectations, however they do that. And there are privileges of being a best friend as well, and lots of benefits. So all roles come with expectations, behavior, responsibility, and privileges. So here would be an example of valued social roles. This is one of the reasons I say this is so practical, is because every one of us is familiar with valued social roles. We, in fact, are in roles our life throughout our life, and indeed, this was expected. It's expected. Think about when a couple is expecting a baby, right? Or a single person is expecting a baby. Oftentimes, the expectant mom or dad, they're thinking about, so what is this, child going to grow up to be? Maybe the child will be a university student, or and some people actually start putting money away so before the baby's born, so that they've got a college fund started, or they wonder. I wonder if this child will be a scientist, or whatever. They're thinking roles, okay, and then the child is born, and they're in the role of being a family member, right? So a beloved child, a beloved grandchild, a sister, a brother, aunt, uncle, etc. And those kinds of roles, you really don't have much choice about, well, at least when you're a child. They're given to you, right? They're ascribed, is what we say. As well, though, then as you start to go through life, you start to enter into other roles. So you maybe as a young child were a member of a play group, or When you went to elementary school, you were in the role of a student. And in that role as a student, you oftentimes are exploring different interests to figure out what do you like. You know, there are clubs after school and so forth, field trips. And as you discover your interest, maybe you decide then that you want to become uh, uh, a member of a soccer team, or that you want to take music lessons and be in the band, or that you want to be a member of the choir, or that you want to be a member of the drama club, an actor in the in the school play. So you start to take on roles. That's how you pursue your interests. And roles continue to grow. Of course, you go into high school, some of the roles you had in elementary school will continue, some will be dropped. Obviously, this role of student will continue after high school. You know, you're thinking about, are you going to continue to be a student, whether in a technical school or whether in a university or college? Are you going to be an employee? Are you going to be a member of the military? So you start thinking, are you going to be a volunteer and do some volunteer maybe abroad? And the roles continue. So I'd like to just take a few minutes and ask you to please just write down, if you have something nearby that you can write with and write on. Just think about the roles that you have in your life, okay? And the roles that you have, a good way I've found to think about this are thinking about these different life areas, you know? So what roles do you have in the area of relationships? So you probably are a friend. Maybe you're a lover. Maybe you're a partner. Maybe you're a neighbor. What about the roles that you have at home? So perhaps you are a tenant or renter. Maybe you are a homeowner. Maybe you take on the role of cook at home. Maybe you take on the role of a gardener at home. Maybe you take on the role of being the maintenance person. I'm trying to think of the role that you would call that, but you do the maintenance. And then think about work. So obviously, if you are working for an organization, or if you're a consultant, you have a title, right? And if you're working for an organization, you've got the name of the job that you're given a job. You may be an assistant. You know, I don't know. There's so many of them. But then also at work, you could think about work and relationships. So maybe you are a colleague. Maybe you are an advisor. Maybe you are a confidant at work. So these roles start to, cross over into these different life areas. What about, we're going to combine the next two, your personal growth, your recreation and fun. So maybe this is endless, but I'll give you some examples. Maybe you're in the role of a hiker. Maybe you're in the role of a camper a couple times a year. Maybe you are in the role of collector. Maybe you are in the role of shopper, although we've not been able to do that quite as much in person recently, but maybe you do that online. Maybe you're in the role of an exerciser. I have a neighbor who's definitely in the role of runner and walker. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you're a musician. You don't do it for your work, but you do it for your personal growth or recreation and fun. Maybe you are thinking about vacationer this year. Might be a little different from other years, but most of us, we enter into that role if we can, at least one time a year. And lastly would be thinking about your spiritual life. And when people hear that, they usually say, well, that means being part of a faith community. It can mean that, being a member of a faith community, and within that community having lots of different roles. But it also, if we interpret that more broadly, could be, what roles do you have that really nurture your spirit? So for example, there's a person I know who loves to read. And this person will get up really early in the morning before going to work so that he can read. It's a passion. And this is somebody I'm pretty close to. And I always know after that person has had his reading time, because he's uplifted. It is very life-giving to him. So just think about that for a minute, maybe the roles that you have that really nurture your spirit. Okay, well, now we're going to move on. Remember, we're tying this idea of valued social roles to moving toward that vision of assisting people to have access to the good things of life. So we want to think about, why are we making that claim that if you, in fact, can be or have access to valued roles and decide to enter into them, how does that help to bring about the access to the good life or the good things in life? Well, here are some of the benefits of roles, and there are more, but these seem to be the key ones. First of all, and you can look at your own list and be thinking about them while I go through this. First of all, roles really bring self-esteem, right? And positive image in the eyes of other people. So when you go into a new situation and you're meeting people, even when you're doing this online, lots of times, if it's people who don't know you, they'll ask you, so what do you do? And if you are working, you usually say your work role, right? They usually don't say, well, tell me about who you are and so forth. Well, when you have roles that you can say, whether you're, and it could be based on interest too, if I'm an artist or whatever, you have roles to say that people can relate to, and that gives you status in the eyes of others. And once you get known in those roles, actually, if you're good at the role, that also impacts upon your reputation. So having a positive image in the eyes of others is very important. But that's not the whole thing, right? Like, probably maybe even more important is to have a positive self-image. That's part of having a good life as well. And your image in your own eyes is definitely impacted by the roles you're in. If you can go back to, in your minds, that picture of those beautiful, vital young men, in their early 20s, approaching young adult life. And look what they're doing, and that was only one representation of an activity, the puzzles. There's many other childish things. How are they going to see themselves? And you compare that with somebody and maybe you're that age, or somebody is that age, who's in valued roles. Not that it's the whole answer to a positive self-image, but it's a big part of it, being in valued social roles. And of course, having an image in the eyes of other people that's positive and a positive image of yourself, we start with those because they're pretty important. And they then affect, the other areas that we know are benefits of roles. Most human beings want to be accepted and belong. That doesn't mean that they'd lose their identity and just become, like everybody else. But most of us, human beings really yearn for belonging, connection and belonging. I think that's one of the things that we have learned during COVID-19 is the longing that people have to be connected, even though we haven't been able to be face to face a lot, to figure out, how we can still have that connection. So it's very important for us as human beings to have acceptance, okay, and be accepted, within our society at large, and then within the society, within different areas of that society, within our families and so forth, and to go beyond that to belonging. Okay, now, not everybody has acceptance in all areas of their life with different groups of people. All of us could talk about, as I said, times when we haven't had that. But I can tell you, this is a benefit that comes from valued social rules. Like, I learned this in my daughter's life when she went to school and she was included. We paid a lot of attention to assisting her to be in the valued social role of grade 1 student, grade 2 student, grade 3 student, etc., all the way through her schooling, because we knew she couldn't just be present. She needed to be in the valued role to bring about the possibilities of acceptance and full belonging. Roles powerfully impact upon your associations and your relationships. So if you are in a variety of valued social roles, you're going to have an opportunity to meet lots of different people and the opportunity to form a variety of different relationships. And you can maybe look back at your list of roles and think about how those roles have impacted on the people you associate with and the relationships that you've been able to develop over the years. I mentioned that I've been coming to Nebraska for a very long time. I will say, in this role as a consultant and as a teacher, I've had the opportunity to meet a number of people in Nebraska and associate with them. And some of those people I've formed very deep, lifelong relationships with. I would never have met them had I not been in this role. Roles also bring the possibility of autonomy and freedom. So if you are seen as a competent, capable citizen, this is not saying that you don't need support, right? We all need support. But if you're seen in that role, it's much more likely that you will be given autonomy and freedom. As well, and this is part of a good life, is having opportunities to grow personally and to develop yourself. And a lot of our personal growth and development is done through engaging in a role and learning about that role and trying it out. And then for the roles that are a good fit, we continue to gain skills in that role. Roles also bring opportunities in life, opportunities to meet new people, go new places, try new things. I worked for Dr. Wolfensberger when I was in my 20s, and that role brought so many opportunities to me to meet so many people, travel so many places, and end up ultimately being in the role I'm in today. If you, in fact, the next one, the material side of life, which we're all pretty aware of right now with some of the things that have happened to our economy as a result of COVID-19, really impact on the material side of your life. So, if you work, even if you're working part-time, you are in a better situation materially than you would be if you're just dependent upon public subsidy. And the last thing is roles powerfully impact on your lifestyle, your daily routines and rhythms, your weekly routines and rhythms, your yearly routines and rhythms. So your lifestyle adjusts, to the roles that you have. Okay, so again, these would be, the areas that add a lot, to your life and make help to really move toward or have that, realize that vision of a good life. So I'm going to just tell a couple of stories here as an example of this, and you could be thinking about those benefits that I just mentioned as I go through this story. You see the person here who's hiking. Well, this is a group of hikers, and David is the man who's there with the dog who's carrying the pack. David was in a day program, and he was very, very unhappy. He'd finished school, he'd been in special education, and this is the option that was offered to he and his mom. His mom is a single mom, so she had to work, and David didn't really like the idea of going to the day program too much, but it was really the only option. So he went. He was very unhappy. It was much like the pictures I showed you. Well, the one picture I showed you where the young people were sitting there at the table. He really didn't have much to do. He loves being outdoors. He was really upset because he didn't like being indoors all day, and he would try to leave the program, and it became a very difficult situation, and David finally started falling apart. And he was very, very unhappy, and he didn't want to go to the program, and when he was there, he was screaming, and he doesn't use a lot of words to communicate, so by his behavior, it's pretty clear, though, what he was feeling. So his mom said, I don't know what we're going to do, but what I do know, David, is this is not working. So she took time off from work, and they came up with a very simple strategy. They invited some friends, and his brother came as well, people who'd known David for a long time, and they brainstormed with David about the kinds of things he might do. And based on his interest of the outdoors, he loved being outdoors, right? One of the young men there said, David, I belong to the outdoor club. Would you like to go to the outdoor club? Well, David didn't know because he'd never been to the outdoor club, but he liked this guy, so he was willing to go with him. So he went, and he met some people. He did some different activities. He really liked it. He went again and tried it. He really liked it. He went again and he liked it. And so he decided that he was going to become a member of the outdoor club. So that was a role that David took on. And in that role, he got an opportunity to engage in many different activities, which I will quickly go through here to show you. So he started out with, those simple kinds of hikes. He progressed to more difficult hikes, uphill over rocks. Then he progressed to doing rappelling. And quite honestly, if you had seen David in the day program, you would never have imagined how capable and competent and strong this young man is. And you can tell he's pretty enthusiastic. He's pretty excited. And of course, he's there with all other people who are members of the outdoor club, who all like rappelling. He's done cave trips. This is a club that has many different kinds of activities that are available to its members. He started bike hiking, which he hadn't done for years. Then from bike hiking, he decided he would become a member of the safety patrol group within the outdoor club. And so this group rides the trails to make sure that they're safe for the bike hikers. And of course, every time David tries something new within the outdoor club and within that role, he meets other people. Okay, so then these are a number of the people that he's met that he, in fact, is engaging with, he's developing relationships here, which is really exciting because most of David's life up to this point had been with his family or in special education. So he did know people with disabilities. What he hadn't had the opportunity to do beyond his family is to meet people without disabilities and to spend time, with people. So this role of the outdoor club, member of the outdoor club, brought lots of opportunities for him to meet people in very natural ways. Okay, well, David, after being in this role for a while, decided that he would like to get a job and make some money. And of course, all of us know, one of the most effective ways of finding a job is through your connections. And it just so happened that David actually, through the bike safety patrol, had met a man who was the manager of the warehouse at Home Depot. He knew that David was looking for a job. He said to David, would you like to come and work at the warehouse, specifically loading and unloading the lumber? David really didn't know what that meant, so he went and he watched the job. He decided he wanted to apply. And remember that David is a man of few words, and so he did have assistance from a supported employment agency, and a very good assistance actually from a employment specialist who assisted David to develop a visual resume, helped to kind of negotiate the interview with the supervisor. And David went to the interview, and the man who interviewed him said, well, that was, sort of good to the guy who's a supervisor of the warehouse. It was okay, he said, but I'm going to give David this job. And basically, he said, I'm trusting your opinion, the guy who's the manager of the warehouse, because you know David. And so the manager of the warehouse had gone to the supervisor and had said, I know this guy. We've been in the outdoor club together for a couple of years. He is really strong. He's really competent. He's really focused, and he will do a very good job for us. So David got the job. And basically, he had that facilitation, which was very helpful. But basically, why did he get the job? He got the job because he had connections. And then he started saving money because he had a dream of owning an ATV. And so he was able to buy his ATV, and now he's a member of a group of people who get together at different times during the year and ride their ATVs. So you can imagine all of the benefits that have come from David having the opportunity to be in these roles, and his life has dramatically changed. He's the same person. Okay, he's still living with the same disabilities. What's changed? The roles that he's in. Okay, real quickly, this is a young woman who, obviously they're graduating from high school, and Sheena, the woman with the red hair, she actually has started her own business. It's just a very interesting story that when she was in grade 8, said to her parents, I want to own a candy store. They took her seriously. When she was a teenager, she worked in a store, so she would get that kind of experience. In high school, she took business courses. She has got, the high school helped her to get a mentor, the retired businessman. And she saved a lot of money when she was working and got a small business loan. And she actually got a store. This took about 5 years and lots of facilitation and lots of support. And here's her store. So Sheena now runs a candy store. It's very interesting. She is a business owner. She hires some employees and supervises them, and she also receives a lot of support herself to do that, both paid and unpaid support. So when it comes to roles, I just want to end my part with a couple of considerations. First of all, Roles are much more powerful if they're based on your interests and passions. And I think both of the stories I told you indicate that. Like David's role really came to life, you know, because he was so interested in it and so passionate. And the same thing for Sheena. Another consideration is that engaging in an activity is good because it helps you to learn what you're interested in, but that doesn't mean you're in a role. That's been a source of confusion for a lot of people. They think, well, because somebody's in an activity, they're engaging in a role. But really, an activity, as I hope you could see from those two stories, is actually engaging in lots of activities within the context of a role. And thirdly, I think one of the considerations that we can take away from those stories is that it's a process, you know, and it's a process for you too when you're entering into a role. So the idea is to find roles that are a good fit for you, and then to continue to grow in that role. Another consideration, which I think the stories told us, and I'm just going to show you this, an example from my daughter's life, is that roles can, as a friend of ours says, cascade. In other words, one role leads to another. So for example, my daughter loves theater. And in high school, she took theater classes at a local theater. Then when she was in university, she had an internship at a theater and learned about all different aspects of theater. And she volunteered at a theater. So she's had a number of these different roles, and she recently got a job working at a theater full-time. So shows you how you can take that interest, you can have multiple roles, and then you grow in each role. Okay, so I want to just say to you, expectations are absolutely critical, okay? So what we expect of people is how they will perform, okay? And for any of you there who are supporters or writing plans for people, you know, really, or yourself advocates, having those expectations that people can enter into roles. You may need assistance, and that's fine. We all need assistance, actually, to be in roles. But those expectancies have to be there, because we know from studying human behavior, what is expected of us, we will act on. So make that a little clearer. If you're an adult and you're seen and treated as a child, you oftentimes respond as a child. You see yourself as a child. You behave in childish ways, etc. So it becomes this, you know, vicious kind of cycle. So to break that, in terms of moving toward, you know, the vision of a good life, would be to have expectations. For example, you know, when my daughter started working, she was 15 years old, right? So she was really, as most 15-year-olds are, she wasn't a real experienced employee, but there were expectations for her from her supervisor, from the peer who was working with her and teaching her, and from us, that she was going to become competent and capable. And it was a process, but she responded to those expectations. And she learned the job, and it was over a period of time, but you know, she ended up getting commendation for being such a good employee. And she, of course, internalized the expectations, and that just you know, helped her to become even more competent. Okay, so lastly would be this idea, going back to our original drawing. So there's the vision of the good life. Valued social roles are a very helpful way to think about gaining access to the good things in life. And remember, this is not about imposing things on people. It's about offering true, genuine, authentic possibilities to have access to a good life. And it's very individualized. That's the other thing I want to say. This is not one size fits all, which I think, you know, we've worked hard on thinking about people as individuals, but I still think we have a ways to go. Okay, and then the last point here is it's really important when we're thinking about valued roles to think about assisting people to have the image of the role and a positive personal image, and to develop the competencies as much as possible that are needed to be in the valued roles. And that again is a process, and this oftentimes for people requires some facilitation by either paid or unpaid support. So this this slide really is just a nice overview of the idea of social role valorization. And I just want to say it requires a positive mindset, okay, on the part of the people who are encouraging, promoting, supporting, helping a person to plan for their life, as well as oftentimes artful facilitation. But the last thing I want to say is it is very practical. It is very, very practical. Down to earth. I think I've learned that about Midwesterners. So they like down to earth and practical. And so, you know, I think this is a very appealing, I'm an Easterner, but I feel the same way. I found it to be a very appealing way of thinking about, a concrete way of thinking about what can be offered to give access to the good life. So at this point, we have some examples, some stories here from Nebraska that are going to be shared by Carol Costello. Is going to share Courtney's story, and Courtney might be on this webinar, I'm not sure. And John is going to also share a story of a person who has worked with Disability Rights Nebraska. Because of the time limit that we had with this webinar, I actually asked Carol and John if they could talk with somebody, get the information from the person, and share it in a very short period of time. We are thinking that at some point we could actually have a webinar where people would share their stories of how they moved out of negative roles and into positive ones. But for time's sake of this webinar, we're going to start by asking Carol if she would please share the story here on behalf of Courtney. And by the way, both people have given permission for their information, their stories to be shared.
So I'm going to present Courtney. Courtney's a very outgoing, personable young woman. She enjoys helping people in many, many ways. She lives in her own apartment, has a job that's not too far from where she lives, so she's able to get there very easily. And right now she receives very limited services from our agency. The role that she has taken on is that of a Lions Club member, and she's been a member of the Lions Club for, I think she said, about 13 years. Some of the activities that she's engaged in while in this role is that she does attend meetings regularly, where she has a meal with other Lions Club members, which I think she really enjoys because she really likes people. She also has an official title as a lion tamer, where she has taken on the responsibility of setting up the room, making sure people have handouts, and then she will also clean up the room after the meeting. One thing that she really enjoys doing is collecting hearing aids and glasses for people in the United States and overseas who aren't able to afford them. She also helps to collect and save coupons for military wives for food. She really enjoys being able to help educate children so they understand the importance of their health, which would include, of course, hearing, eyesight, diabetes, and cancer. She volunteers at a thrift shop that provides clothing and other items that helps inmates that are coming out into society. And she's also attended 2 international conventions, and these pictures that you see here are from those conventions. She has attended those with several of her other Lions Club members. The first convention that she attended was in 2015, and this was the first time she had ever flown on an airplane, and this was to Hawaii. And then the second one was in 2017 in Chicago. So when asking her how this role has impacted her life, she feels that she feels good to be able to help others. I think really that could be her mission in life, is to help other people that maybe are less fortunate than she is. She feels that she's very much appreciated in this role. She has met a lot of people through her local meetings and has become friends with many of them. And she's also met a lot of people internationally at these international conventions. Her world has expanded in meeting all of these people, being able to travel to different places that she probably would not have experienced before. And she really sees herself as a role model for many people. And there is Courtney.
Thank you so much to Courtney for allowing Carol to share the information with us. We hope that we'll see Courtney in person at another webinar. And Carol, thank you very much for talking to Courtney and relating that information.
You bet.
Okay, so now we're going to ask John Murphy, who's from Disability Rights Nebraska, to talk.
Great. Thank you, Darcy. I had the privilege of interviewing Mr. Michael Warner in preparation for this webinar. I first met Mr. Warner when he was a member of the Disability Rights Nebraska Board of Directors, and I provided staff support to a committee of which he was a member. The picture you see on your screen is that of Mr. Warner and Mary Angus, the chairperson of the Disability Rights Nebraska Board of Directors. And as you see, they're holding a plaque Mr. Warner received in recognition of his advocacy efforts. So a short introduction of Mr. Michael Warner. He was born in Hammond, Indiana, and moved to the Omaha area with his family at age 3. He identifies himself as a disability advocate, a policy nerd, an avid reader, and a pursuer of equal opportunity and justice for all. He is following in the footsteps of his mother, who was a passionate civil rights activist who passed away in 2009. And Mr. Warner recently completed his coursework and received his associate's degree. And he now plans to enroll in university to pursue a bachelor's degree. So the role Mr. Warner has taken on is policy advocate. He defined it as outwardly using your voice to speak out on issues related to people with disabilities. And he shared that my own lived experiences make what I need to do clear. So the activities that Mr. Warner engages in while in the role are: he studies the issues from every angle and makes a decision which policies, laws to support and which policy and laws to oppose. Those are equally weighted. He talks to networks with other disability activists to seek information and clarity. He spends time with Brad Neurens, who is the public policy director at Disability Rights Nebraska, again to seek information and clarity. And then in preparing his testimony, he uses a boilerplate statement to begin, and in his testimony, He also develops a mental outline of the substance of what needs to be communicated while making sure that he is able to speak from the heart to show passion and real emotion. And what he shared is that written testimony in the form of a written script doesn't work for him. So he has developed his own style how to communicate this testimony. As you can see from the picture here, he dresses impeccably. Those are French cuffs, shirts, dress shirts with just so recognizing the professional setting and the need to be taken seriously is very important. Traveling to Lincoln and presenting testimony to various legislative committees on a variety of issues. So it's ranging accessible transportation, traveling to Lincoln, hurry up and wait. You get your testimony ready and then you wait for the opportunity to testify. And holding himself to a high standard. So the quote here is, "Fight for what you want with a passion, but not hurting others." And Mr. Warner said it's not easy to remain respectful when you know how others are disrespecting you, but maintaining that high standard is really important. So how has this role impacted Mr. Warner's life? He is fulfilling a core part of what makes him the person he is destined to be. He is paying it forward and honoring a family tradition. And the quote here is, "I had the template for how to move forward when my mother passed away in 2009. And then he has used that template moving forward. He is known by members of the legislature, staff, and other policy advocates, and he has grown in the role, receives energy from it, and is recognized by others." So, any questions regarding that? Yeah.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Mr. Warner, for allowing John to relate that story to us. And thank you to both Courtney and Mr. Warner for the contribution that you're making to so many people. So we'll just conclude by saying these would be some of the content that we will be going through in the SRV workshop. You can see it's there's a lot to share, but we wanted to give you at least a taste of it. We hope that today you're walking away with some information that helps you to think things through and that you're interested in. And if you do want to follow up and get some more information, you can go to this website. There's lots of information that is available on there. So thank you for attending. At this point, we are right at the limit, but we did say we would stay if there are questions. We would be glad to answer them. So let's see, John, have you had a chance to look at the questions yet? Or I guess I can too. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any questions. So does anybody?
I am here. The question here is from Marcia asking, is he paid in his role, Mr. Warner?
Okay.
And I believe, no, he's not. He does this on a volunteer basis.
Are there any questions about anything, the stories or the content of the webinar on social role valorization?
Here's Darcy for you. It says, "Thanks so much, Darcy. As always, I am inspired and energized by hearing these materials presented by you. Welcome to Nebraska for a virtual visit. Hope to be able to connect again in person," which is great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank the Nebraska Coalition for Values-Based Training and Disability Rights Nebraska for sponsoring this webinar. And you can certainly, if you wanted to email me, my email is on the first slide. And feel free, if some thoughts occur to you, to do that. And we hope that we'll get to meet in person and see you next June. Thank you very much. Hello?